In the cold cradle of twilight, where the wind of time howls through the ruins of forgotten empires, there lingers a truth too monstrous to be carved into stone. Not all prayers rose to heaven on whispered breath. Some were screamed blood-choked, bone splintered from the hearts of trembling men and virgins alike. The air was thick with smoke, with the perfume of marigolds and the stench of warm blood. The old gods, they said, must be fed so that the sky would not fall. And so, a young warrior barely 15 summers old was led up the steps. His skin was painted blue, his lips dry from the sacred herbs that dulled his senses. But the urns, hundreds of them, told another story. Tiny charred bones, names etched in Phoenician, a language the gods understand, beloved of Tanit, gift to Baal. The gods had no mouths, and yet they were fed. He did not scream as they laid him upon the obsidian slab. Tlacacalcatl raised the blade, and as the blade fell, the winds rose. The gods were pleased. The heart, still beating, was lifted high toward the rising sun. The crowd roared not in horror, but reverence. Agamemnon, king of men, once stood before his fleet, trapped in dead wind. In the darkest chambers of belief, the sacred and the brutal intertwine. The ancients believed they could trade pain for mercy, death for renewal, and sometimes they did. After the sacrifice, the rains came. The sun returned, the crops bloomed, and the people rejoiced. Not from history, but from the mirror it holds. Because the old gods may have died, but the hunger remains. His men thirsted for war, but the sea refused. The priest said it was Artemis who held the winds. She demanded a sacrifice not of goats or bulls, but of the king's own daughter, Iphigenia. Atop the great pyramid, the high priest Tlacacalcatl stood robed in crimson. In our politics, our wars, our economics, we still feed our gods. But we call them by new names: profit, progress, peace. But let us not lie to ourselves. Our hands are red too, only we have learned to sterilize the blade. He was not a man in that moment, but a vessel, trembling with divine purpose, eyes rolled into the heavens. Below him, 10,000 hearts beat in unison, knowing that some would not beat for long. Before the gods listened, they hungered. Let me take you to the basalt steps of where obsidian knives gleamed like the eyes of serpents. It was the festival of the sun. You may recoil. You may whisper, savages. This is not just a tale of the Aztecs. Look eastward now, across ocean and sand, to the ancient city of Carthage. Among the stone effigies of Baal Haman, where the wails of infants mixed with harp strings and priestly chants, the ground remembers. Here, under moonless skies, mothers wrapped their firstborn in linen and offered them to the flame. The priests spoke of prosperity. They said the gods would make the earth fertile again. And the mothers, with eyes hollowed by famine and faith, watched their children burn. Not a tear fell. Not a single cry interrupted the ritual. For to weep was to deny the gods their honor. Archaeologists once debated whether such horror was real. Surely, they thought, no civilization would sanctify the slaughter of its own seed. You may ask, why blood? Why not wine or incense or silent devotion? Because blood speaks a language older than civilization. Even in Greece, cradle of logic and reason, the gods were not gentle. And so the girl was summoned with lies, told she would be wed to Achilles. She arrived beaming, veiled in white. Her mother wailed. The soldiers looked away. Was Agamemnon a monster? Or a man imprisoned by belief, by legacy, by fate? Across cultures, across centuries, the melody is the same. When crops wither, when rain won't fall, when the stars vanish, the answer is blood. But these rituals, these offerings, were not madness. They were bargains. Do not think it far removed. Today, we no longer offer hearts upon altars, but the instinct remains. Do you feel the chill yet? And this is only the beginning. They said the gods slept beneath the earth, that if men did not rouse them with blood, the world would fall silent and rot from within. But what if they never truly slept? Here among the fjords of ancient Scandinavia, before the Norsemen raised great halls to Odin, the land was ruled by fear. And in fear, they made their offerings. Their skin, tanned by centuries of peat, bears the signs: slit throats, crushed skulls, strangled necks. Their deaths were not accidental, they were chosen. Let us leave the blood-streaked stones of Carthage and behind, and descend into the mists of the north, where pine forests whisper secrets only the dead understand. The bogs still yield their truth. Talon man, Grobble man, the ID girl, perfectly preserved, curled as though asleep but with no peace in their faces. You see, in these damp, forgotten lands, kings once reigned only as long as the sun rose and the crops grew. And when the king visited the grove afterward, the wind itself would part to greet him. Should famine strike, should the blizzards howl too long, the king himself became the sacrifice. A god made flesh, then flesh made offering. The people would bind him in sacred ropes, smear his body with ochre and oils, and sing old songs as he was lowered into the bog, not buried, offered, preserved so the gods would remember. When plague comes, when the river floods, when the sky turns black, we seek order. Ritual gives us that. Sacrifice gives it meaning, but justice needs no tomb so cruel. In the kingdom of Dahomey, west of Africa, the royal ancestors were fed not with words but with death. Prisoners of war paraded through the streets were led to the foot of sacred trees. Oracle bones, they called them. Cattle scapulas, turtle shells. If the signs were ill, if war was certain, or drought near, a youth was chosen. Sometimes a noble's child, sometimes a stranger. Their blood would be smeared on the Kraxen, offering to change fate. There the executioners danced, the axes sang. And with each fall the drums thundered louder. And they did remember. The bones have been unearthed, their questions still visible. Will rain come? Will the army return? Will the child survive? The answers came not from gods but from screams. Even the Romans, so proud of their roads and laws, sought blood beneath the polished marble of their temples. The Vestal virgins, those holy maidens sworn to purity, were buried alive if they broke their vow. No man touched them. No blade spilled their blood. But still, they died slowly, with the weight of sacred stones pressing above them in silence. It was meant to honor the gods with Zilipochi and Tlaloc, gods of sun and rain. Over 4 days it is said that 80,400 hearts were offered. When a people fears enough, it will kill anyone to be heard by the sky. The Romans claimed it was justice. But the murals tell a different story, rows upon rows of captives. Flayed, stacked, bones polished, blood turning the temple steps into rivers. A canoe is lost at sea. The waves rise, the fish vanish, the people starve. And then one night the chief's daughter throws herself into the ocean. The sea calms, the fish return, her body is never found. But a new island appears weeks later, a volcanic plume smoking in the distance. Not all rituals required crowds. Some were whispered in corners, hidden behind red screens, enacted beneath the black of moonless skies. It is said that the blood soaked into the roots, and the ancestors drank deep. But here lies the horror behind the horror. Not the acts themselves, but the sincerity with which they were done.
Oh.
None of these people saw themselves as evil. None of them thought they were monsters. They believed they were saving the world. Perhaps in some twisted way they were. The human mind is not built to bear chaos. There is a name for this in every ancient tongue. The blood price. To give, so something greater may live. In ancient China, during the Shang dynasty, bones were scorched and cracked to read the will of heaven. These were not myths. Even now archaeologists debate. Were these systems driven by religion, power, madness? But what they often forget is fear. Fear is older than any god. It does not need a name. There is an old tale from the islands of Polynesia. They say the gods took her. They say she became the land itself, and no one questioned if the death was in vain. Because the silence of the sea had broken, that was enough. Are these tales distant, strange, incomprehensible? Let me tell you of something closer. In 1487, atop the great temple of a celebration was held to consecrate its expansion. 80,000. Some historians call this impossible. Others say it is exaggerated. And when the final heart was raised, the sun blazed like a furnace, and the people wept with joy. The old gods, at least for a while, were satisfied. They always want more. You might wonder what kind of gods demand flesh. What sort of divinity is so starved that only agony can awaken it? But perhaps the question we should ask is darker still. What kind of people obey? Let us go now to the highlands of Anatolia, to the ancient city of Hattusa, capital of the Hittite Empire. There, before stone lions and storm gods carved in basalt, an old rite unfolded each equinox. A white bull sacred, untouched by blade or yoke, was led to the temple. It was fed honeyed grains, anointed with sacred oils, and sung to like a king. The people believed that to treat the bull cruelly before the sacrifice was to insult the god himself. But in the final hour, the mask fell. The high priest would plunge a blade into the creature's throat not with rage, but with ceremony. As the blood gushed, the onlookers fell to their knees, not in horror, but awe. The god of storms demanded a clean cut, a perfect death. And the people, hungry for rain, dared not disappoint, were accused of poisoning wells, angering God, defiling Christ. But no one asked why God would require the death of children to lift the rain. It was not cruelty, it was devotion refined through fear. This is the paradox at the center of all sacred blood. It is not spilled with hatred, but with love. You think this is a relic of bronze and stone? Look again. Selected from among the young and beautiful, they were told they would ascend, their essence merged with the king god. The priests prepared them with days of fasting and lotus tea. They were bathed, perfumed, dressed in gold. The people turned not to reason, but to sacrifice. But this time, it was no longer kings or beasts offered it was Jews. In medieval Europe, beneath spires and bells, the practice endured. But the gods had changed. Their names now came from Scripture, their temples from Rome. Still, the need for blood had not vanished. It had only changed masks. During the Great Famine of 1315, as rains drowned the crops and the sun hid behind clouds, rumors spread of divine wrath. Entire communities were rounded up and burned, drowned, broken in public squares. Because in every age, the gods were the face of the aerosphere. They were fed a diet of maize and coca, marched hundreds of miles, and brought to summits where the air itself could barely hold breath. There, they were left to freeze peacefully, they said, in the embrace of the gods. Fear wielded properly is the sharpest blade of all, and the blood flows all the same, had sung, had told themselves she slept. Now let me tell you of something worse, something done not to appease gods, but to become them, that they did not know better. But under her fingernails were tiny, broken blood vessels. Signs of struggle, life clinging to itself. In the deepest chambers of the Khmer Empire, beneath the towers of Angkor Wat, inscriptions speak of the chosen of the Devaraja, those who walked willingly to their deaths. They evolved, afraid of famine, of loss, of death. And when fear comes, so too does the knife. They became cleaner, quieter, embedded in policy and ceremony. But still someone always pays the blood price. In trenches, in camps, in cities, bombed to ash, their blood was spilled for ideals dressed as gods. No idols, no temples, only flags. Then, in silence, they were buried alive beneath the palace stones. Their screams, it was said, would echo into the next life, guiding the king's spirit into godhood. It was not a punishment, it was an honor. When the next king died, the rite was performed again. One might wonder, why did no one run? Why did no one fight? Because to resist was to become an outcast, cursed in both this life and the next. But sometimes resistance did come. And when it did, the blood was doubled. Among the Inca, high in the Andes, children were chosen for the Capacoca ceremony offerings to the mountain gods. But one child, La Doncella, they called Huro, was found in recent years, perfectly preserved, her face serene, her lips still tinged with coca, and yet the people below had danced. The lie was more beautiful than the truth. And that is where the horror lives, not in the sacrifice, but in the justification. We say they were primitive, but what is our excuse? In the 20th century, soldiers were offered on the altar of nationalism. And when questioned, the world answered with the same whisper. It was necessary. How different is that from the priests of Carthage? You see, the ancient rituals never vanished, because deep down we are still afraid. not because the gods demand it, but because we do. So now we arrive at the altar once more. But this time, there are no pyramids, no obsidian knives, no high priests. Only a sand, the silent question that trembles behind our breath. Have we truly left the old gods behind? Walk through any modern city and listen closely. The drums may be gone, but the rhythm remains. Each year, we sacrifice sleep, sanity, and time to invisible thrones. Ambition, fame, progress. We still build monuments from blood, we simply hide the scaffolding. We cut away our joy for productivity, offer our health to the cult of success. Some give their youth to factory lines, others their old age to silence and loneliness. Children still die in tunnels. But we do not call them offerings, we call them labor statistics. But you will see its shadow in every cost-benefit report. And when they are displeased, it is not just a crop that withers, it is nations. Do you remember the markets that crashed? The wars that burned? The lives discarded like ash? There were no chants, no fire, no ceremony. But they were sacrifices all the same. And in the boardrooms of power, where numbers dance like spirits, you will not hear the word blood, because the gods have changed their masks again. They are algorithms now, economic models, trends and targets. They demand not incense but obedience. We no longer raise hearts to the sun, but we do bleed for the lights on our screens. We do not chant, but we scroll. We do not fear storms, but silence. And yet, not all of it is darkness, you see. Buried beneath the horror of these ancient rites lies a truth so old, we dare not say it aloud. We are a species that believes in something higher, in something beyond. New words, new gods, but the same aching question. And that belief, twisted though it often is, has birthed both cruelty and courage. For every altar soaked in blood, there was a mother who knelt beside it, whispering a name. For every sacrifice demanded, there was a heart that broke, to surrender, to protect what we love by offering what we can. And in those broken places, something sacred was born, not in the gods but in us. It's the impulse to give. That's what all of this was trying to express in the only language the frightened once knew. Let the sacred fires go out. Today we have new tools. What must we give up so that the world might continue? This is the thread that binds the bog body to the modern martyr, the priest to the protester. The gods no longer require our blood. They still receive it. And so, we must choose what kind of gods we wish to serve. Not all sacrifices must end in death. Sometimes to offer your voice, your time, your kindness, is a defiance far more powerful than any blade. Let the old temples crumble, and let us at last build a world where the gods are not fed with suffering, but with memory. So that the boy upon the altar, the girl in the mountain ice, the mother in the fire, all of them are not forgotten. Not because they were divine, but because they were human. And perhaps that is all the God we ever needed.